Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here this evening. If we have not had the opportunity to meet, I am grateful that you chose to spend the evening with us, learning and growing our professional toolbox. My name is Candy Sellers, and I have the wonderful privilege of serving as our current IDA North Carolina branch president. And here in just a few minutes, I'll turn it over to our president-elect, Kristen Sinclair. But I just wanted to take an opportunity and welcome, encourage you to ask questions in the chat as you need to. There will be an opportunity to ask questions as we go along and to stay tuned at the end for follow-up webinars that will continue on this topic and supporting our learning community. So again, thank you so much for being here. And Kristen, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Fantastic. Well, I am super excited to be one incoming president of such a fabulous organization, but it is such an honor to be able to introduce Dr. Dashik this evening. I have been a longtime fan, so to meet in person and to hear all the fabulousness that he has to share around the topic of writing. I think this is an area that many of us as educators always find the need to build our capacity as being teachers of language. So Dr. Dashik is the director of the Iowa Reading Research Center and a professor of special education at the University of Ohio. He is a former K-12 special education teacher, an elementary teacher, director of special education, and academic performance director. So many hats and some great experience to share with us. He received his PhD in special education from Pennsylvania State University, and he researches literacy, instruction, and assessment, and specifically ways to support concurrent writing and reading development of students that with disabilities or at risk for disabilities. So welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'm going to turn this over to you, Dr. Dashik.
Okay, thank you, Kristen, and thanks everybody for the warm welcome. Special shout out to you all for joining me on a Tuesday, which I love that saying, a Monday, Tuesday. That's definitely the feeling around my house. So I'm the father of a 8-year-old and 3-year-old, and I love the Labor Day weekend, but sometimes it makes me really appreciate the early elementary and elementary teachers, just the amount of energy that was bursting through my household. So I'm thrilled to be with you all this evening. And the title of my presentation is, Are Simple Sentences Really That Simple? And that's kind of my cute way of trying to unpack what are evidence-based practices to teach and assess sentence writing. Before I get started, you can download, and I'll put the QR code up there. I'll also drop this in the chat as well. There's a tiny URL that will take you to a folder that has just a bunch of different goodies on there. It'll have some practice sheets, some articles that I either served as lead author or co-author on that will further unpack sentence writing, and hopefully it'll help it land in your classroom or working with your kiddo at home. So here's what we got going on today. So I'll just briefly introduce myself. We'll start to unpack what do I mean by sentence writing and how does that play into overall writing development. And I tend to take a look at something called the simple view of writing. And then I'll unpack tips to teach and then tips to assess it. So again, thank you for that very warm welcome. So again, my name is Sean Datchik, and this is kind of wild. You kind of blink and then all of a sudden a decade has passed. But this is my 11th year here in Iowa. I have officially now helped raise 2 Iowa boys, so I think that makes me a native Iowan, or at least I like to think so. But before I was a faculty member and then now director of Iowa Reading Research Center, I was a K-12 special education teacher, dual endorsed in elementary education as well. And one of my big struggle areas as a teacher happened to be writing. To be blunt, I sucked at teaching writing. So I struggled with it, and I knew that there's no way that I could be alone. So my teacher bookshelf, as it were, there were some things in there for reading. We definitely need to know a lot more about how to best support, particularly students with dyslexia, when it comes to reading development. But there were at least some things on my shelf that I could pull and use. Same thing with my math shelf on my teacher bookcase. My writing shelf, though, was pretty bare. So again, I knew that there's no way that I could be alone and kind of feeling frustrated with this. So I've dedicated the decade plus of my career as a faculty member to trying to figure out what works, what doesn't, and what are some easy to use tools that I could help research, develop, and show to teachers, educators, administrators, parents on how they can support the sentence writing development of their own kids. So that's where my passion lies, and I'm excited to unpack some of the things that I've discovered over the past decade, some things, some great researchers out there. Before I do that, though, let's get on the same page on what I mean by sentence writing. So I tend to think of sentence writing as two related skills. So one is text writing, and then two would be sentence structure. So that first part, text writing, that really refers to multiple words strung together. So that can be, let's say, I ran, or Tamil ate, so that there are more than one words that are strung together that make grammatical sense and semantic sense. So it's used to express meaning. So from the listener or from the reader, we can take a look at that combination of words and go, okay, this is what is meant by this phrase, by these two words, these two or three words. So once students can pick up text writing, again, that's multiple words, so two or more words, they can form it into a structure or sentence structure. And this is just the basis of a sentence. And we can think about that as being a simple sentence. So at least one subject, one verb, perhaps a capital letter to begin, and punctuation, but it can get more complicated. So we have a simple sentence where it's just one subject, one verb, and it can build up to more complicated structures such as complex sentences, compound sentences, etc. So again, sentence writing, I tend to think about two buckets, text writing and sentence structure. And we expect students to gradually develop these across time. So within Common Core standards, it starts all the way to early elementary. And by the end of second grade, we expect students to produce, expand, and rearrange complete, simple, and compound sentences. Now, that's easier said than done. So, for instance, here's a first grade student. They had this picture's kind of cut off here, but there was a really cute cartoon photo of, or cartoon drawing of somebody stuck in a snow globe, and it says, "If I were stuck in a snow globe, dot 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 dot, I would build a snowman with my family." So as you can tell that this student is starting to latch on to the basic building blocks of sentence writing. Now, we can pick apart this sentence, the spelling isn't the greatest, etc., but at its core, you can tell this student is starting to internalize, hey, text writing is when I kind of string together multiple words, and that there's a structure to sentences that as I'm developing my phonemic awareness, phonological awareness, phonics skills, as I'm making those important spelling connections, that I am latching on to this structure. So I would build a snowman with my family. So by no means do we expect at the end of second grade for students to write with 100% accuracy everything involved in a sentence. But what we do expect them, hopefully, is to latch on that there are these structures that sentences follow, and that there's these text writing rules, and that I can now apply my reading and spelling knowledge to those areas. And unfortunately, what we know is that sentence writing difficulties are common in early elementary grades. That's not all that surprising, just like that first grader. And for some students, particularly those with disabilities such as dyslexia, is that some students can have persistent sentence writing difficulties early on, and this would be low accuracy that persists not only through early elementary, but could go and extend past elementary, middle, and high school. And if we were to take out our proverbial magnifying glass and take a look at the writing of some students, and unfortunately many students with disabilities, we would tend to see this cluster of similar writing difficulties. Some students might struggle with just writing output. So I'd like you to think in your mind's eye of, let's say if you're a teacher or perhaps have a kiddo at home, if they were struggling with writing, you go, okay, I want you to write, let's say for 10 minutes, you kind of circle around the room. Maybe if you're at home, you do dishes and then come back. Then when you come back, not a whole lot has been written down there. So they could struggle with writing outputs, and that leads to overall lower scores on writing quality. So, and that's not all that surprising. So if you don't write that much, perhaps what you write is judged to be of lower, let's say, holistic quality. The second would be sentence writing fluency. And so sentence writing fluency would be with accuracy and efficiency, trying to write multiple sentences. Grammar could be such things as subject verb agreement, or perhaps some verbs are missing entirely from sentences. We would see some issues with spelling. And then also, we might have difficulty just determining what you're trying to write, so the legibility of your text. So I'd like to draw your attention to sentence writing fluency. And then, so again, that's accuracy and efficiency, or accuracy and speed. And why would that be important? Why would both these things, accuracy and speed or efficiency, be important? Well, it does play a role in overall writing development. And I tend to situate my work in the simple view of writing. There's some wonderful theoretical models of writing out there, including from Young-Suk Kim over at University of California, Irvine, that has further expanded upon these models. I tend to at least stick with this one for now. So the simple view of writing, to where what is special education without a triangle? So here's a triangle model of writing development, to where we have transcription, text generation, self-regulation, and then we have memory resources here in the middle. So this first part would be transcription. And that refers to all the skills needed to handwrite or type individual letters, to form those letters into whole words. So transcription would be handwriting, typing, and spelling. So with each individual word, the skills involved in spelling that word and handwriting or typing individual letters. So that would be transcription. And if students develop transcription, then they can work on this other part of the triangle, which would be text generation, was where students write multiple and spell multiple words into phrases, sentences, extended composition. So text generation would involve text writing, so multiple words that follow rules of grammar and it expresses understandable meaning, into sentences, into paragraphs, essays, stories, etc. And this third part would be self-regulation. It's also in some models called executive functions. There are some distinctions there, but for now, let's just talk about self-regulation. And this refers to the start and stop parts of the entire writing process. So when we think about the writing process, it's easy for us to conceive of, let's see, you have some idea generation, you start writing, and then you revise. But what we all know is that very rarely do we just engage in those phases of planning, writing, and revising in lockstep. So what I mean by that is, sure, we tend to, you might have been typing up some emails right before you logged onto here. You tend to engage in some sort of planning before you write the email, and then you start writing. But chances are is that you're starting and stopping throughout that writing process. Very rarely are you just write, and then that's it. I don't know about y'all. I am a chronic overuser of the exclamation point in my emails. So usually what I have to do is just throughout what I'm typing, I'll have to stop and go, okay, that's 2 sentences straight with an exclamation mark. This sounds kind of crazy. Maybe I better just, okay, let me put the period back. And then so there tends to be the starting and stopping of like, okay, what do I want to say in this email? Is this clear? And then so it's that start, stop. You're revising all throughout, and you're thinking about, is my message landing? Perhaps certain word choices have to change, etc. And what we know is that all 3 of these big buckets, or these 3 composite skills, are trying to compete for memory resources. So to put simply, unfortunately, we can't do everything well all of the time. So as these areas are developed with accuracy and efficiency, so accuracy and speed, they get committed to long-term memory, which means that additional working memory or short-term memory is freed up for students to consider other aspects of writing. So for instance, I don't mean to scare anybody, but on my drive here, I only have to drive about 10 minutes from my house over to campus, which I'm incredibly lucky, but I can't tell you a single thing about what happened in that drive. And that's because my driving skills, after having had my license for 30 years now, is that all those things are so fluent, so I have some accuracy and some efficiency with all those things, that I no longer have to actively attend to every single aspect of driving. So I'd like you to recall, I can certainly vividly recall the first time I went on the highway, where I was white knuckling it, and I was just so uber focused on every single aspect. And then that was exhausting, right? Like you can't possibly try to attend to everything all of the time. And the same thing's happening with your writing or your students' writing. So the more that they can commit to long-term memory, some of these knowledge pieces, some of these skill pieces, they will no longer have to actively attend to those during the actual writing process. And that's when the juicy bits of writing can start to come out. So I want my students to be able to focus in on, is that the best idea? Is this the most convincing idea on my essay on why students should be able to chew gum in schools? I don't really care what anybody says about that. I'm probably going to say no either way, but I do want them to focus in on, okay, what are the juicy parts that will make this a convincing, persuasive essay? And in order to get them to focus in on those, these other aspects of writing, particularly here text generation or sentence writing, would need to be committed to long-term memory because I don't want my students to have to write a sentence after every sentence and go, okay, is that a complete sentence? Okay, do I have a... Because unfortunately, that time and that attention, if they're focusing in on that, the other parts of the writing task could be floating on by, so to speak. So there tends to be a clear cognitive benefit. So fluent skills, when proficient, again, tend to transfer to long-term memory, and that frees up more working memory or short-term memory resources for other aspects. And there tends to be a clear writing benefit. So writing fluency at the sentence level, so the degree to which students can accurately and quickly produce sentences or produce aspects or words or ideas at the discourse level, they're both related to overall writing quality. So that sort of theoretical piece on helping students develop fluency with different aspects, we do see sort of that bang for the buck, so to speak. So students are able to attend to these other aspects. And furthermore, it tends to be a key predictor of success on standardized writing assessments. So such as statewide writing assessments in Iowa, it's called the ISASP. I don't mean to throw or bring back any uncomfortable memories for you, but it also used to be called the Iowa Test of Basic Skills. Perhaps you had the lucky privilege of taking those tests when you were in middle school or high school yourself. Okay, so if sentence writing is text writing and sentence structure, and we know that some accuracy and efficiency is needed in order to unlock these other aspects of writing, what are best ways of teaching it and assessing it? So let's start to unpack that now. I also have the chat up and running. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop it right in the chat. I'll be sure to look and then respond to them throughout. So for the past decade plus, I've been researching different ways of increasing students' sentence writing fluency. And I've applied, and myself and other researchers, I know Leah Russell's on this call, and she just did her dissertation on this. So congrats to Leah for completing her dissertation. That's a huge milestone in your life. But I've had the privilege of working with some other folks too. But what we've started to research or have been researching is a combination of explicit instruction and fluency practice. And so this is kind of like those really bad diet commercials you'd see on TV to where there's the before picture and the after picture. So just hang in there with me. But basically during baseline, what we would see is that here would be a sample of an actual student writing to where we gave them some picture word prompts. And they wrote, looks like they said Jane, I think that's stole. So Jane stole piggy bank. So largely sort of copying what the words are here. Here's Gwen planted. And this is the same student after about 15 to 20 supplemental writing intervention sessions. And you know, we aren't seeing post-Renaissance type sentences. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times by any means. But what we see is just a clear understanding by the student of sentence structure and text writing to where we have a clear capital letter. Maybe that M's a little too big. But we have Miss Rice open the door, period. This is a pretty good sentence. Tom had a tightrope climbing event. period. So what we see is that as a result of a supplemental dose, so to speak, of explicit instruction and fluency practice, we see on assessments used within classrooms and also used to measure the risk of writing difficulty, we see improvements in text writing and also sentence writing, an increase in correct writing sequences. You might be asking, what's that? We'll unpack that here momentarily on CBM writing tasks or curriculum-based measurement writing tasks used commonly in schools. And who can benefit? Well, we've done a series of studies all the way from elementary. The youngest has been grade 2. I have worked with some teachers who have adopted or adapted this as early as kindergarten, but at least published study-wise has been grade 2 all the way through high school. Students with disabilities and writing difficulties. Prior studies have typically included students who could. So I'd like, in your mind's eye, perhaps you have a classroom right now, or you're working on supporting teachers, or you're just knowledgeable about and trying to get more knowledgeable about the comings and goings of writing instruction. I'd like you to think about perhaps you have a student in your mind that they can handwrite alphabetic letters. So you at least need to be able to see what they're writing. It doesn't need to be pitch perfect, picture perfect writing by any means, but you can at least tell what they're writing. They can spell high frequency words. Again, everything doesn't have to be spelled 100%, but they can at least spell some high frequency words. They can read some connected text. The reason why that is one of the requirements is that in order to revise your writing, you really need to be able to read back with at least some automaticity what it is you wrote. So if they can handwrite some letters, it doesn't have to be perfect, but they can handwrite at least some. They can spell, again, doesn't have to be perfect. They can at least spell some. They can read some connected text. Again, doesn't have to be perfect, but at least some. And they also struggle to write complete sentences. We've tended to include those students, work with them, and have seen some results. So my wife makes fun of this website every time I mention it because it's not the most creative website title I ever came up with, but it's just my name. So it's just SeanDatchick.com. I dropped it in the chat. You can also scan this QR code. If you were to go to that website, what you'll see is some free evidence-based curriculum pieces, and it's for free. So I'll go ahead and do this. So if you visit this website now during my talk or later, I'm not going to put this behind a paywall or anything. So in other words, you'll never visit this and go and see a pop-up that says, "Hey, what's your credit card number? Come here often?" I'm not interested in that. I've been very lucky to, in my career, make a living out of thinking, reading and writing and working with teachers, and I can't think of anything better than that. So you have sentence instruction, sentence practice, sentence writing materials. So if I were to click on sentence instruction, let me make this a little bigger. It has some preamble things and that we're going to unpack here, but it has a little bit more detail here. Sentence practice. So for instance, if you go to this sentence instruction ribbon, sometimes depending on your web browser, this ribbon can be over on the left side. Most times though, it's up top. If you were to scroll down, sorry, I don't mean to give anybody motion sickness, but here's lesson 1 script. Here's lesson 1 student material. So if you click on that, it'll bring up a PDF that you can download and print. And it'll walk you through what the instructional activities are. Also, this script has suggested instructional language throughout. And so I'll unpack why some of the phrases are the way that they are. Anyway, that's just my name, SeanDatchick.com. Okay, so let's unpack the design and delivery that was involved in creation of those materials and why it is. So step 1, segment sentence writing into small instructional units. So that's part of the design. Then we have step 2 and step 3. So these steps 1, 2, and 3 are all done before you actually start delivering any sentence instruction. And then step 4 and 5 refers to, okay, now you're sitting with kiddos. So step 1, segment sentence writing into small instructional units. So segmenting just refers to the process where you're trying to control how difficult a task can be by separating it into these smaller, less complex instructional units. And for reading, what I love about the research and development that has gone on decades with reading is I think we have a pretty good handle on ways of segmenting reading skills to control for difficulty, to where we can break apart texts into sentences, words, phonemes, individual graphemes, and then we can build those up. For writing, it's a much more complicated story. But what we've had success with is, and these are researchers besides myself, have had success with, are these three types of formats. So I'm going to unpack identify, complete, and generate. So identify is where students select examples from non-examples. So they're basically either pointing or circling or just saying, okay, that's an example, that's not an example. Complete would be fill in the blank, and generate is where now they need to write multiple words to complete a response. So just intuitively, just thinking through the progression here, identify, they really aren't writing. Now in the complete, they're writing some, and then C, they're writing the most, or at least they're writing more. So the identify would refer to something like this. So for instance, here's Kim jumped high into the air, the old man read the newspaper, the small dog chased the cars. Here we're just identifying parts of a sentence. So here we could be identifying the part that names or the subject. And then here is complete. Now it's really the same skill. It's just we're asking students for a more complicated part to where now they need to write the part that names or the subject within the blank. So blank sat at a table with a stack of books. Let's see, that's Dell. So here. And then finally generate to where now they have picture word prompts, but now they need to write a complete sentence. Okay, so we have identify, complete, generate. Slightly more complex across time. And you're going to notice, or you might have already noticed and said, okay, what's with why are there so many pictures? And then why are there word prompts? I thought pictures were bad or not part of science or reading. Most times you would be right. But for writing, it tends to provide a really good focal point. So we'll unpack why picture prompts might be a benefit, particularly for students who have difficulty with the basic building blocks of sentence writing. So let's think about these two different prompts. So here we have this lovely looking woman here, and we have two word prompts, grandma and eggs. If I were to show that prompt to, let's say, a small group of students and say, you know what, write a sentence describing this. Let's say if I have a small group of students, student 1 wrote, grandma cooked the eggs. Like, okay. Student 2 wrote, grandma was making breakfast with eggs. Okay. The really great thing about this picture prompt is that it provides a focal point in the environment that all students are describing. So to say that again, it is exposing ideas in our head or in our student's head and having everybody try to generate text or ideas describing the same thing. The reason why that can be beneficial is that as a teacher trying to provide instruction and feedback for students, if everybody's describing the same picture, chances are their sentences are going to be pretty similar. So what that means is that if I provide feedback to student 1, like, oh, awesome, capital letter, you said grandma, okay, that's the subject. Then you told me more about grandma cooked the eggs. Oh, that's great. You told me one thing, grandma cooked. Oh, I love grandma and cooked match. That's wonderful. Chances are, since everybody's describing the same picture, the feedback that I give to student 1, now student 2, student 3, student 4 can look down, and that feedback can be relevant to their sentence. So again, when we think about feedback provided to students, we want it to be, I was just over at a pond with my sons for Labor Day, and my son was trying to skim an acorn on a pond. Acorns didn't work that well. I was trying to tell him you need kind of a flat rock to do this, but he was trying anyway. But when you skim a rock on a pond or a lake or a river, you want it to ripple, right? You want it to skip multiple times. The same thing with your instructional feedback is that as a teacher, if your focus is on the basic building blocks of a sentence, the feedback you give to student 1, you want it to ripple to student 2, to student 3, etc. Now let's take a look at this other prompt. Let's say, and there is nothing wrong with this prompt. It can be a great way to generate ideas. So write about your favorite meal to have in the morning. So students can make real life connections to their personal lives. That's amazing. Student 1 could write, oh, I don't eat breakfast. And student 2 could write, oh, I like fresh pancakes, eggs, chocolate milk, donuts. Again, nothing wrong with this prompt if the goal here is to have students make personal connections with their lives. If the goal, though, is to help students build the basic building blocks of a sentence, this feedback doesn't really ripple out. Because if I said, okay, student 1, I don't eat breakfast, When I give feedback to student one, student two could be looking down like that has nothing to do with my sentence, or student three, or student four, or student five. So again, since we're using picture word prompts, we're providing a focal point in the environment for everybody to describe. So when we give feedback on the basic aspects of text writing or sentence structure, we're basically leveling the playing field by having everybody describing that same picture. So picture word prompts are used across research-based scopes and sequences. So this scope and sequence we've used in my prior studies, and then other studies have used it as a part of a larger curriculum. So to where you can start off with identify, so it could be a capital letter at the beginning of sentences, punctuation mark at the end. So again, identify is just you're spotting ones that have it versus ones that don't. Complete, so you edit sentences to start with a capital letter. So sometimes it's missing, sometimes it's not, etc. And then it's kind of an interchange between your identifying, completing, and then finally up to generate. So you're going to see that baked across the lessons that we've used in my research and that other researchers have used. So mine, the stuff that's on my website is much smaller and focused than a whole curriculum. So this is not meant to be a core curriculum. It's meant to be an instructional practice that you can embed in whatever curriculum you're using. So it's specifically focused in on simple sentence structure. There's 3 to 6 lessons of explicit instruction, about 25 minutes each, depending on how fast your kiddos can handwrite, and then 10 to 15 practice lessons of 10 minutes each. If you're thinking like, oh, okay, your description makes some sense, and what happened? I want to go past simple sentences, different research and different curricula. So there's a wonderful direct instruction program by Zig Egelman and colleagues called Expressive Writing, and has a broader scope. So it uses those same steps to teach simple sentence writing all the way through paragraphs, much longer. So instead of the 3 to 6 lessons and the 10 to 15 practice lessons, these are 50 to 100 to 50 minutes each. So that's the first. So segment sentence writing into small instructional units. Then 2 would be to prepare complementary instructional scripts. So a key part in explicit instruction is clear, consistent, concise language. I think that's my full impression of Anita Archer. I can't really do her voice, but I've heard her say clear, consistent, and concise enough to where I have completely embedded that into my personality. So here's a key part is we want it to be unambiguous communication between a teacher and a student. And here's where the instructional scripts come in handy, because I'm going to propose a somewhat unconventional definition for sentence writing, where we teach students to name someone or something, in this case, Gary. And again, I mentioned that I have a 3-year-old at home, so I am very familiar with what Gary's doing right here. But Gary spilled milk. So we name someone or something, and then tell me one thing, spilled milk. So we start off with this rather simple, direct definition of a simple sentence. So a simple sentence has 2 parts. They name someone or something, then they tell more. It also starts with a capital letter, ends with a punctuation mark. Again, unconventional for sure, but perhaps more direct. And I'm going to suggest it can, at least initially, perhaps improve efficiency and decrease the complexity of sentence writing. Why is that? Well, if a student is struggling with complete sentences or simple sentences, we could start off with, oh, well, it's missing a subject. Well, what's a subject? Well, it's a noun. Well, what's a noun? Well, it's a person, place, thing, idea. It could also be a state of being. And then it's like, oh, okay, well, and then you also need a verb. Well, what's a verb? It's a predicate. Well, what's a predicate? Well, there's action verbs, and then there's linking verbs. And then also sometimes verbs can be subjects, and those are called gerunds. It's very important that students eventually learn the parts of speech. I'm not suggesting that. I think eventually students will need to learn the parts of speech. But at least what my research suggests is that if a student is struggling with sentence writing, unless you want to hear the beep, beep, beep of the vocab truck backing up and then dumping a lot of different words and phrases, perhaps sticking with this unconventional, rather direct, you name someone or something and then tell more, and you use explicit instruction to help shape the rules of text writing, that can be a much more efficient, speedy way of getting students to hit the ground running. Okay. So you're going to see that rather unconventional phrasing within the scripts that I have posted on my website. And then three, and we haven't even begin yet to provide actual instruction. So this is just, we're still designing or planning. Now we need to select strategies for active student responding. So two important considerations in writing is modality and then a strategy for response. And then here's going to be another thing that you're going to see in the lessons that we've done across studies is that we are consistently prompting students to respond vocally, so with oral sentences and also written. And there's some theory and then some practice underlying that recommendation. So in theory, it leverages the strength of oral language and written language together. So it tries to wed those two together. So in other words, you might have heard this. You might have heard this saying: "Students write the way they speak." There is some logic to that. Now, it definitely changes by audience and purpose, et cetera. But we want students to get the practice of this is what is involved in a complete sentence when you say it, and this is what's involved in a complete sentence when you write it. So in theory, it tries to wed those and leverage the strengths of both those together. And then in practice, students can typically, most students at least, can provide vocal responses quicker than it takes them to write it. So I know that many of you have worked with students, if you're a teacher, or have had kids yourself, to where this is the case, to where the first draft of anything is the last draft. That I'm not going back and revising this. So whatever I write the first time, that's what I'm turning in. And I get that. So in order to make writing less aversive, what it's basically saying is that, okay, let's talk through what you're going to write. Let me hear it, and then you write it. So it basically sidesteps or makes the response effort involved in writing less aversive. So here's to be an example of using both modalities, and you're going to see this throughout the lessons. So the teacher could say the part that tells more. So in this part, it could be held a pizza box. Okay, find the part that names up here and say the whole sentence. Alexis held a pizza box. Oh, great. Now write it. So you're going to constantly see those volleys to where, in this case, just pretend that this is an actual blank. And then before they actually write it, they're engaging in those volleys with you. And then you need to pair this with some sort of response strategy, and that's going to differ based off of how many students. Now, most of the studies that I've done have been in small groups. We have had educators and schools adopt this for whole group. We had one study that's still we're writing up to where we have delivered as a whole class intervention. But basically, most of it has been small group. Now, if you're working one-on-one with a student, it could simply just be more of a conversation to where they're vocally responding and writing. If it's smaller whole group, you can use unison responding to where you can present an item and then ask a question, pause for think time, and then signal. Now, most of that, and then students respond all at the same time. Now, that is easier said than done for the identify and the complete formats. So for the identify, since everybody is looking at the same sentences and the responses are going to be roughly the same. So here's the part that names. So number one, the first sentence is Kim jumped high into the air. Get ready to tell me the part that names. The part that names here is, and then I can signal and people say Kim, like, okay, go ahead and underline it. Now the identify format, that works pretty well. Because again, it's a short answer. It's all going to be roughly the same thing. Same thing with the complete format to where you can use unison responding. So let's see, number 9, it says blank. Get ready to tell me the part that tells more. Blank sat at a table with a stack of books. Okay, take a look at the picture. Get ready to tell me the part that names. The part that names is Dell. Now say the whole sentence. So there's a volley there that you can engage in because, again, the responses are short. They're all describing the same thing. It's roughly the same. The generate is where I've seen teachers use unison responding for this, but the responses are going to vary slightly enough to where this is more of a one-on-one where you have to call on students. So get ready to write a complete sentence. You have 2 word prompts here, dairy and water, and then give them time, and then you can call on individual students to sort of talk through what they're going to write before they write it. Now, one of the other things you might have noticed here is that a lot of these picture word prompts, they're lowercase for everything. The reason why we did that is we want students to internalize the rule of what needs to be capitalized and what's not. So before we would put down the capital letter here, or we would capitalize the proper nouns, and then the students wouldn't even really look at what the picture was describing. They're like, oh, okay, there's the capital. I'm starting off with this. And then, so it kind of defeated the point. So we want students to have to make that next internalized decision on like, okay, what's the words? What can be capitalized? What's a good name someone or something? So here would be an example. Let's say teacher number 9, get ready, read it with me. Blank sat at a table with a stack of books. The teacher says, that part tells more. Look at the picture. Get ready to tell me the missing someone or something. Dell, now say the whole sentence with a missing part. So you could do some sort of unison response strategy. The reason why unison responses there can be beneficial is, again, if you're working with students who are learning the basic building blocks of a sentence, it really starts to become, I tended to view it a little bit of a way to wring out every single instructional minute that I could by having students respond as often as I could during instruction so I could give them feedback. So for the identify and the complete format, you can do that at a pretty fast pace. And then that gives you more confidence that when students get to this generate format, that since you've heard all of them through the identify complete, it increases your likelihood basically that, okay, when students are now doing most of this internal work to where everybody isn't talking through it, that I have confidence that they're going through those steps internally. Okay, so that's steps 1, 2, and 3, and those are all how do we design instruction. And now, okay, you made it through this far with me. Thank you for making it this far. So we have step 4 where now you actually provide the instruction. So we use a model lead test framework. Now I am on the IDA chapter, North Carolina. So you might be asking, what's the I do, we do? No, I'm just joking. You obviously know the I do, we do, you do. Model lead test. So where every single format, when we introduce a new instructional unit, there's some sort of model to where a teacher shows and tells, students respond vocally. Under the we do, students respond vocally and now in writing, and then the you do is where students just respond in writing. You're going to see that throughout the different instructional scripts. I try to go the next step on when you look at these instructional scripts. I basically say, okay, if numbers 1 through 4 are going well, that this is kind of what we need to see. And then if you get through to numbers 5 through 8, this is hopefully what you're seeing. So I'm giving kind of benchmarks within each lesson going, okay, if the gradual release is actually happening, hopefully you're seeing this around these numbers. An important point on explicit instruction, and the times that I've worked with teachers and also use explicit instruction myself, sometimes I think particularly teachers who are new to explicit instruction or direct instruction, they might think of the I do, we do, you do as lockstep. And this is an iterative process. So what I mean by that is that after modeling, if you start to see multiple errors happening, it's okay to go back up to modeling. That's completely fine. So even though in the instructional script it says, here's what, if it's going well, what should be happening? Hey, lessons are the real world. I can't tell you how many lessons I've had explode in my face, particularly that first year of teaching. Your first year of teaching is largely an exercise in how much you can get past how many of your lessons fail, unfortunately. And then you kind of go, okay, yep. If you start to see errors, it's completely fine to go back up to modeling. The instructional formats are also spread across multiple lessons. So what you're going to see, lessons 1, 2, and 3, in lesson 1, some of the instructional units, you'll just do the model and the lead. And then perhaps in lesson 2, you'll pick up model, lead, and then to test again. So it's slowly building up these skills. So here would be an example. Identifying parts of a simple sentence, that part that names, part that tells more, is done in lesson 1. Then it's picked back up in lesson 2 with some more independent practice. And then at the end of every single lesson, there is, there's different phrases for it. There's a daily assessment, exit ticket, checkout ticket, curriculum-based assessment. There's a mini curriculum-based assessment at the end of every lesson, and then the goal on what we consider accurate is on there. And if students don't hit that 90%, then we just ask just repeat the lesson. What we see is that for some students, they can get immediately in 3 lessons, they latch onto it. Some students have needed about 6 lessons. But really and you'll see once you download the materials, it's really about helping students understand that structure of you name someone or something, you tell more, just tell me one thing, capital letter, end mark, and then you're picking up the text writing skills through this modeling, through this guided practice, etc. Okay, so that's number 4. So we use explicit instruction, again, 3 to 6 lessons. A lot of students can finish up in 3 lessons, sometimes it's 6. After that, though, this is when we pick up on the fluency practice part. And so as a result of explicit instruction, what we'll see is that for most students, at least, we'll see an increase in accuracy. And that's wonderful. We want students to write sentences that have these basic foundational aspects of complete sentences. But now we need to help students make this next step. So if you remember in the simple view of writing in that triangle, it's not enough to just simply be accurate. We want students with some speed to have committed these parts into their long-term memory. So what does that mean for our instructional procedures? What that specifically means is that we need to provide practice for students to where they can internalize that structure in a more rapid pace. So I'm not suggesting that students need to be speed writers their entire lives, but what we need to be able to do is help students engage in high amounts of quality practice in a short time that allows them to internalize that when they write a complete sentence, they intuitively know it. That is a complete sentence. Sure, there's always going to be, I mean, even now, when I write a sentence, I'll write it, I'll intuitively know it's a complete sentence, and then I'll have to go back and go like, okay, maybe later do a check on different things. And that's okay. But in order for me to get to where I'm consciously paying attention to the juicy bits of my writing, I need to have internalized that sentence writing structure. And this is where the fluency practice comes into play. So fluency practice can help with speed and efficiency. So similar, many of you have probably done repeated reading interventions, or let's say repeated math facts. For sentence writing, there are 8 steps for each fluency practice session. But before we get into that, let's take a look at a unique way of scoring sentence writing. And this is going to be for correct writing sequences. So here would be an example. Let's say the little girl screamed, Dan cut a fish, wanted to clean the stove. Now, if I were to score these just as sentences, I go, okay, here's one sentence, check. Here's one sentence, check. Here's another sentence, check. And that's okay. But we are going the next step on scoring each individual sequence from did you start with a capital letter and then in between Wanda and cleaned? Does that make grammatical sense? Can I understand what's happening? You get another check, clean the stove, stove between the period. And you might be thinking, wow, that seems like quite a bit of time. And I agree with you. But I think there can be some benefits to doing this. So let's take a look at this. So the bird sang. So I have a 3-year-old at home. He's learned the the rule that lots of little kids learn is that, oh, if something happened in the past, I'm just going to slap an ed on it. So I sang. I can't tell you the different ed endings that my son has come up with. But so the bird sang, and then so let's say if the bird sang. Now there's a big difference in that sentence to this next one. The children played basketball in the cold, windy afternoon, and then another, the dog ran. So in here, one sentence and one sentence. But there's a big difference between these sentences. If we want our students to be able to write sentence number 1, sentence number 2 is good. Don't get me wrong. But we want to encourage students to write more complicated sentences. And during our pilot and development of this intervention, we initially stuck with just complete sentences. And again, we were working with students who were having sentence writing difficulties. So once they latched on to, oh, you mean like a sentence just really needs 3 words? Guess what? I was working with so many kids that were just like writing 3-word sentences. They're like, I'm not even sure what I fully understand the sentence, But this guy with glasses really likes it when I write complete sentences. So pretty soon it was the dog ran, the kids ran, Betty and Tom ran, the cat ran, the bird ran. And then so they just kept ending, and I was like, oh, I'm actually this has been a side effect that kids who were struggling for a while now are tasting success, and they're like, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to be successful. And then it was actually running against one of our goals of helping students latch on to more complicated sentences. So once we switched over to this correct writing sequences, students started to go like, oh, okay, so I pick up more points if I can put in words here that make sense, that go together. And then that's better. I'm like, yes, exactly. So there, and then there's one difference. So if you were to ever use correct writing sequences for progress monitoring or for universal screening, there is a requirement that the words are spelled correctly. And if you're using correct writing sequences for progress monitoring or universal screening as a part of response to intervention or multi-tiered systems of support, that is definitely still the recommendation. For this, for the practice and the instruction part, what we found is by loosening the criteria a little bit, by allowing for phonetically similar but misspelled words, by counting those as correct, students were willing to take more chances, so to speak, and to apply their reading skills. So to go back to this example, some students, again, who are struggling with writing are like, I don't really know. I know that I know how to spell the word ran. So again, I'm going to use ran for every single thing. Or I know how to spell the word dog. So I'm going to put dog, whether or not the picture had anything to do with it, I'm going to put dog in there because I know how to spell it. So then again, it started to become where we'd have students write just a handful of words because they definitely knew how to spell those to get the points. Then I was like, you know what, just try to spell it. So that would mean like we'd accept this coffee instead of coffee. So I can kind of tell like, okay, are birds instead of birds. Now it's important that I do realize that those students, okay, we are going to need to address that through spelling instruction. But at least for this, when we're talking about sentence structure and text writing, I'll go, okay, you know what? Just try your best to apply what you know about reading to spelling. So if it's spelled similar but technically incorrect, we're still counting it. We look for capitalization, the beginning of a sentence, proper nouns, and punctuation. We're also looking commas in a series. It'll surprise you. Sometimes, particularly students towards like at least uh, first couple fluency practice sessions, they'll start to throw in some commas because they'll be like, oh, yeah, I mean, I get some points for these. Or then and then they follow rules of standard grammar and it makes sense. So, as an example, let's say if we had Fred looked the window, Jake watered the plant, Tori carried some groceries. I'm going to try something here, and please don't get mad at me because I know there's nothing like doing homework at, what is it, about 7 p.m. your time. So I'll drop this in the chat. It's a tiny URL that will get you to a Google form that looks something like this. So I'm going to put up the rules on scoring for correct writing sequences. And what I'd like you to do is just write the number of correct writing sequences that you would score right here. There is no one right correct answer, but for these four. So I'll go ahead and put up these rules here. And I'll just give you just about a minute. So you probably won't be able to get through all of those, but then we can talk about what the scores would be. So please, if you don't mind indulging me, just in the chat, there will be an opportunity for you to click on that tiny URL. And then I'm right here if you have any questions. All right, just about 30 more seconds. I apologize. I know you're not likely to finish all four of those, and that's okay. Okie dokie. I apologize everybody for starting and stopping, but just for the sake of time, I'll go ahead and at least put down what I put here. So here I have Fred started off with a capital, and I love working with teachers because I can tell you how many times dollars to donuts, pretty much every presentation or every other presentation, I'll have particularly ELA teachers go, "Are you sure that's a capital? I'm not sure," or which I love that discussion. So, but let's say I'm a heart on my sleeve grader. So let's say we have Fred. Fred looked. Something's missing there. I can't, maybe it's Fred looked out the window, something, but I just put an X there because the chain is broken. So that's sequence. So Fred looked the window, and they get a point here for having a word before the period. And then so Jake missing a capital. And then in the sequence, once the sequence is broken, it's broken on both sides. So missed a capital, and then so they aren't getting that point. And it's not the end of the world. So if I've had some teachers go like, "Oh no, let's, Jake Water, that's still," if you do give them the point there, we're just off by 1 point. It's in the grand scheme of things, it's going to wash out. Jake watered the plant. Tori carried some groceries. It looks like it's missing the period there, so they wouldn't get a point. Roger sprayed water. So then we would total up these correct, and then that would be their score. So here would be the steps. So now that we've kind of reviewed that slightly awkward, perhaps time-intensive way of scoring, here would be the steps. And then hopefully when you take a look at that, you could see some benefit on why we're going to that level of detail. So one is that we could review the prior scores, if any, and set the goal. So in this case, we could say it was a 4, 7, 11, 15. Let's say, okay, you got 15. And then so that's what you got last time. Let's try to beat our score. And we give 10 picture word prompts to the student. So if you were to go to my website, let's see, these would be all on the sentence practice page. Again, I don't mean to give anybody motion sickness, but let me click on, let's say, lucky number 12. So here would be 10 picture word prompts. So starting with Jerry Sandwich, James Splashed, Stewie Sandcastle, the cat piano. So we'd give them these 10 picture word prompts. And then we'd review the prompts and answer any questions. So you'd give students, let's say, a minute or two and sort of look through. Some students might have a question like, what's that word? You're like, okay, that's astronaut. This is cell phone. The artist that I had draw these, she was in Vermont at the time. So we've gone through development of this across time, and some of the things that she drew, some students in other geographic locations weren't familiar with. So, for instance, one of the pictures had somebody snowshoeing, and then we did this intervention in Louisiana, and so many kids wrote down he's playing tennis with his feet. That was like the most popular sentence. And we're like, oh, okay, so that's a clear example of background knowledge and not. So, we have removed some across time, et cetera. But so you might get some questions on what's going on here. So you review prompts, answer any questions, then you set a time limit. Now, most studies have just used 1 to 2 minutes. There are more picture word prompts here than the students can possibly write to in a minute or 2 minutes, and that's okay. I wouldn't go really past that 2 minutes. So we've adjusted this a little bit. Sometimes we've had students write for 3 minutes, and it's just too long. Hand fatigue starts to come into play because what they do is actually it's 1 minute feedback, 1 minute feedback, 1 minute. So the other times where we have teachers go 3 minutes feedback, 3 minutes feedback, 3 minutes. By the time I got to that second 3 minute, like kids were putting their pens down and it's going like, oh, so I wouldn't go really past that 2 minute. And then once the student begins writing, you start the countdown timer. And then you go, okay, remember, try to write a complete sentence for as many pictures that you can. If you come to a picture that you aren't quite sure, just skip it. That's okay. All set, please begin. And then they start writing. And then once, let's say the minute's up, you go, okay, go ahead and put your pen or pencils down. And at the end of the time limit, you collect at least one student to score. So let's say this is in a small group. So while students are writing, that could be a great time to walk around and then see and be thinking about which students can I take and project onto the board or score in front of the other students. Now, you will know as a teacher, some students you don't want to do that with. But then there's going to be some students who would generate who are completely fine with you showing what they wrote. And then you would actually score that out loud. So you provide performance feedback. And that's where I think the power in this type of scoring comes into play. Because you go, oh, Fred, capital, you got a point. Fred looked, okay, awesome. Fred, oh, looked, oh, something's missing here. What's a word that can go in there? And then it's like, oh, it looked out. Like, oh, okay, if you just make that change, you could get the point next time. So you go through that. And then during that scoring, I think that that's when I've really seen the light bulb moment happen where kids are like, oh, so like the more complicated that I make these sentences, I'm picking up points. So you provide performance feedback. You praise specific parts of writing like, oh, wonderful, 2 parts. You provide some error correction in just a business-like manner. It's just errors are part of learning. Like, oh, remember, you could try that. And then you repeat steps 1 through 6. So you could say, okay, everybody, now flip that paper down, put it on the corner of your desk or whatever, and then you have a second copy of the same 10 picture word prompts. So the students aren't looking at what they previously wrote. Now it's just, okay, just here's the same pictures. Try your best. Try to write as many complete sentences as you can. And then, so it would start all over again. So it would be, set a time limit, try to write as many complete sentences as you can, etc. Now, if you go to my, let's see, if you go to that tiny URL I put in the beginning on that Google Drive folder, there will be some examples here. So here would be an example of practice 3 for one student. And this is kind of what we see. So for this student on the first one, Eric carried a box. Again, carried is not spelled correctly, but it was close enough to where I'm like, okay. And then I put that in my little teacher checklist, like, okay, I'm gonna have to review that rule. The old man had some bird food. Ben rode a scooter. Add that up, 16 and 2. Okay, awesome. And then we go, okay, let's put that face down. Here's another brand new copy. Try again. Here's a minute and try to go. Now notice this, now the students, and we typically see this to where they're trying to pick up these additional points. So Eric carried a fragile box. The old man had some bird food. Ben rode and then here they got 16 and 1. So think about this in 2 minutes. They've gotten so far practice writing about 6 sentences just in 2 minutes. And when you think about that from a dose perspective, where you're trying to give students lots of practice, internalizing these aspects of complete sentence writing, that's a pretty good amount to write over a paragraph in 2 minutes. And then finally, here's practice timing 3, where Eric carried a box. So the student's just like, that fragile thing kind of messed me up. The old man had bird food. Ben rode a scooter. Danny. And then and we typically see that across timings, is that students will, they'll gradually pick up speed. Sometimes the wheels will fall off the bus because they're trying out different words, and that's okay. And then so that goes on for 10 to 15 days. And so if you have 1 minute, feedback takes a couple minutes, 1 minute, feedback takes a couple minutes, 1 minute. If you do that, it tends to be about 10 minutes per practice session. So you have the 3 to 6 explicit instruction lessons. That's about 25 minutes. Then you have 10 to 15 practice lessons, and those take about 10 minutes each. So in that small amount of time, students have had a large dose of high quality practice writing and internalizing the basic building blocks of a sentence. And I think that that's where the power has come out of the intervention, is that it gives students structured support on learning these important aspects. Okay, so for about the next 10 minutes, I'm going to unpack different ways that you can assess the growth of students. And then I want to just give some time towards the end if there are any questions. First, curriculum-based measure. So that's an assessment with standard procedures that allows teachers to directly measure an important skill. And these are used across multi-tiered systems of support or response intervention. They're used for universal screening. They're used for IEP development, where you're determining the present level of performance, or the present level of performance, also known the PLOP I worked at a school that was like, what's your students plop? And I was like, that's kind of, but present level of performance, progress monitoring. And CBM has all sorts of benefits. It's standardized, it's efficient, it's instructionally relevant. It's a low inference measure, so the skills are directly measured. It doesn't measure cognitive skills like IQ. That can be important, but we're directly interested in the instructionally relevant skill. It's criterion reference, so there's some sort of predictive validity to where a student score on this could help predict later on performance. And then so we'll look at one specific type of writing CBM, and that's written expression CBM or WE-CBM. And so students will just need a WE-CBM probe, and that's can be a story starter with lined paper and pen and pencil. Oh yeah, okay. And then a stopwatch and acquired environment. And then so if you look at in the folder that I posted earlier, there's a copy. AimsWeb, the company AimsWeb produced and researched these cross-age suitable story prompts, and they're freely available. So I posted a copy on here. There's over 100 of them on there. So you just need some sort of story starter. The early writing project, I don't make any money off of this, but it is a wonderful resource, and it's from Doctors Erica Lemke, the University of Missouri, and Krista McMaster at University of Minnesota. And they've produced the early writing project that has a binder that you can buy of all types of CBMs. The binder itself is like $40. They also have a binder of intervention materials. That's another $40. I wish that this was around when I had my teacher bookshelf, because for $80 you would have blackline masters of copies you can make for CBM materials. It has administration directions, scoring instructions, etc. I can't say enough good things about that. But so they have some story starters there as well. Then it has standardized administration directions. So you would give students, let's say in this case, a WECBM probe. So I was talking to my friends when all of a sudden, and then some lined paper. And then you could say, today I want you to write a story. I'm going to read a sentence to you first, and then I want you to compose a short story about what happens. You'll have 1 minute to think about what you will write about and 3 minutes to write your story. Remember to do your best. If you do not know how to spell a word, you should guess. Are there any questions? So then you give students a minute to kind of think about, okay, I was talking to my friends all of a sudden. And then, okay, let's pick up your pen or pencil. Please begin. And you give them 3 minutes. And then we can, after that, collect it. So in just a couple minutes, you collect that. And then when the student's dismissed for the day, you maybe go over to your favorite coffee shop, you buy a latte. And then you can start to score it for two things: sentence structure and then correct writing sequences. So sentence structure is that we could just basically count the total number of sentences written. And so this can inform instruction. There's not really great norms here for the number of sentences because one long sentence can technically be a complete sentence, like a long compound sentence. But then students can write very short, choppy, simple sentences and get a higher sentence score. So, sentence writing can just inform instruction. There's not really great norms for that. But the types of sentence structures can be a complete sentence, so begin with a capital letter, end with an appropriate punctuation mark, contain at least one subject verb, and do not contain errors so significant that a sentence is uninterpretable. So it's a pretty broad definition, and we've used this definition across different studies. It tends to serve us well. Incomplete sentences where it's missing something, where I've seen this. I've certainly given students a passage and it's just one long run-on sentence to where I can't really tell what's going on. Different characters are introduced at certain points. Pronouns are used before the character's name, so I don't know who the he or she is referring to. Or it could be an unfinished sentence to where we've had some students go, I was walking to my friends when all of a sudden I saw some, and then that's it. And that's all they got to. So it could be an unfinished sentence even. And then there's some special scoring rules. So this would be connect to prompt sentences. So that would be technically complete. They just directly connected it to this. So they didn't bother to rewrite this sentence or anything. They just kind of pick it up from here. And that's okay. Or it could be an incomplete sentence. So that's a response that are connected to the prompt and are missing at least some sort of feature. And then you could score for different types, complex, compound, complex, compound. I won't get into that today. Basically, what I'm going to suggest is that when you take a look at these, if you're trying to think through who could qualify for an intervention, you're basically looking at, can students write at least some simple sentences? So we're just going to stick with, got a complete sentence. So here would be an example. So this is an actual student writing sample. Kathy went on the lake to go fishing. She loved going fishing with friend two. Susan brought fishing poles for, I think that's Kathy, but now it's kind of, they just missed, but Katie too, Kathy too. She loves going fishing with her friends. Okay. So here we got a complete sentence, subject, verb. There's nothing, I think for the most part, it's pretty solid. She loved going fishing with friend two. There's some grammar issues going on here, but, complete sentence. It got some structure going on. So, hard on her sleep grader, we'll go, it's a complete sentence. Susan brought fishing poles for Kathy too, or Katie. She loves going fishing with her friends, just maybe ran out of time. Didn't put a period here, but that's okay. Overall, it's pretty good. So if here, I did have some other activities built in, but I'm not going to do that because I can read the room, and I don't know how many additional scoring things I can put you fine folks through. But so let's say if it was, we got this. This could just be one long incomplete sentence. So it was summer and Janice, Smitty, and Harriet were outside listening to music. Janice used the hula hoop. Smitty danced and Harriet stood on a chair and blew bubbles. It was a lot of fun until the storm came, dot, 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 dot. So here there's not a period at sight. I think there's some sentence stuff going on here though, but this might be pretty similar, perhaps what you're seeing for some of your kiddos. Okay. And then so you can score that for sentence structure. And then you can also score for correct writing sequences. So, and that's the same steps that we did before. And what we see is that it has moderate criterion validity. So in other words, when we take a look at just that small writing sample of the 1 minute think time, 3 minutes writing time, it can moderately correlate with these other established writing measures, which is good. And then also some variations like percentage of correct writing sequences has been shown to be potentially more sensitive for students who are English language learners. But in order to calculate the percentage of correct writing sequences, you need to really have a solid foundation on correct writing sequences. So unlike our instruction and practice writing, spelling does count. So it needs to be spelled correctly for this. And then so for this example and the Kathy went fishing example, if we were to score that, I got a capital. Kathy went on the lake two, fishing. She, and then they're missing some points for some grammar things. Friend is misspelled, so they're losing some points here, etc. And if we were to score all that, I think the really cool thing about that scoring system, though, is that there are national norms for this. So you can establish local norms. So you could literally convince your principal or superintendent or district administrator or get together with some other homeschool parents and administer some of these and then figure out where's the average, what's below average, etc. There's also national norms. So these tables can be kind of confusing. So let's unpack this. So we have first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, fifth, and then all the way through eighth. 50th percentile, so that is 50th. So that's the average. This is to be 25th percentile, so below average. 75th, 90th, that's above average. So at first grade in the fall, what we see is that students can roughly write 2 correct writing sequences. That's pretty humbling. So let's think about that. So in about 3 minutes, students can write, a couple words that follow these rules of grammar. They're spelled correctly, etc. But then by the end of the year, it's all the way up to 11. So that's some solid growth there. First grade, let's say you have your fourth grade teacher, you administer this. Right now it would be the fall, and you find your students score 20. So that would be below the 50th percentile, so below average, higher than the 25th percentile. And then our goal would be to get them to at least 38 by the end of the school year. So that's how you would interpret these tables. The cool thing, I think, why it's it's preferable to perhaps take a look at some of these established writing measures. Is that you could just in a couple minutes administer this, take it home, take some time to score it, and then that will give you a good temperature check on overall writing in your classroom. And during that, you could take a look on, well, how many sentences am I seeing? Is it just one long, complete run-on sentence? Or do kids kind of have the foundational aspects? And then here you could really drill down and go, okay, are there specific areas of writing? And then overall, compared to other fourth graders, compared to other fifth graders, seventh graders, where are my kiddos at? And then that can help inform, okay, what are different things I might need to try? And one of them could be a supplemental writing intervention like the one that I showed you. Okay, that's all I had for this evening. I do have time up until well, let's see, I'm an hour behind you all, so up until 7:30 your time. If there are any questions, I'm happy to chat. But thank you all so much for your time, your energy. I really appreciate. I don't take for granted that you gave up your Tuesday evening to talk with me about sentence writing. So thank you all so much.
Thank you so much for being here. And I'm going to turn it over to Trina, who's checking the chat to see if there's any questions. And then Kristen will wrap us up for the evening. But again, thank you so much on behalf of IDA North Carolina for being here. Trina, I'll turn it over to you, see if there's any questions in the chat.
Thank you, Candy. Yes, I do see one question. Do you think teaching that a simple sentence has a who and a do is clear enough or too concise? I think it's literacy how that uses this language. So
That's a good question, Leah. Yeah, I would be open to what works. I think one of the difficulties, we tried different language for the do part, and for so many students, they, at least what we found, interpret action language as meaning it needs to be some sort of action verb, to where, because it could be a linking verb. So many of beginning sentences are using is or are or was or were, to where they're describing something like the car is red, the bike is broken, that there isn't really a do there. A doer and do. Okay, yeah. So I do think I don't have a solid. I think that would be a worthwhile study to do to see what's the most clear, consistent, concise language that helps students efficiently increase their accuracy. But at least from what we found, there is some power in just kind of the tell more and then gradually shape that with just examples and non-examples. But I think the certainly if William Van Cleve is recommending that, I mean, just had so much respect for his work. So if he was having success with that, then I think it's probably worth a try. I also did see a shout out for University of Iowa. So Jen, all right, very nice.
All right, Dr. Datchuk, we've got a couple more.
Okay.
Leah says, when can we look forward to reading about your whole class study?
That's a great question. Right now I am struggling with work life balance, so I'm hopeful to get that out. I did it in coordination. I'm a co-author with it on a wonderful colleague Bridget Heyer, who's over at SUNY Cortland. She was at Syracuse University. So it is done. The data's been collected. It's just a matter of analyzing and writing it up. But it was a randomized control trial, which I was really happy about that. So the short of it is it won't be 2025, but I'm going to start putting the pressure on to try it 2026. So it's helpful. And then Leah, and then just send me pestering emails if it doesn't come out. That'll help me.
Emily also has a question. Within an environment where curriculum that addresses language comprehension that is scripted, do you have tips to integrate these methods to help with sentence level understanding with students?
That's a great question, Emily. I know that particularly for students with dyslexia, it can be so challenging, just the different terms of vocabulary that's used for what we consider these simple, rather simple concepts. But it can have big consequences for students in terms of just how confusing some of the instruction can be. I wish I had a better answer. what I can say is that we've had a number of teachers implement this within their scripted curriculum. And thankfully, I think the definition is broad enough to where it is adaptable. So when we've had teachers say, name someone or something and tell more, some teachers have gone that extra step of just like, oh, well, my students know subject, know a verb, or whatever language, and then they've really just reinforced that. So they've slightly tweaked our definition. I think there's nothing wrong with that. The only reason why we're using name someone or something and tell more language is so we don't have to unpack those other vocabulary quite yet. But if your students are already working on that vocabulary, that academic language, why not? Why not have them use it? Unfortunately, I don't have a completely satisfying answer there, but I hopefully that helps, and that if your students are working on that academic language, by all means, go ahead and reinforce it in this intervention.
Also, Dr. Datchuk, there are two questions. One from Laura, where she asks, in the Jake planted example, can you explain why the errors were marked before and after Jake?
Yeah, good question. Let me check. I think it had to do with Jake, at least. So I'm going to share my screen real quick. At least to my eye, Jake, that would be a lowercase j. So this wouldn't have needed to. Can you all see my screen? I guess I should check that. Okay, cool. So if this was I think that the J would need to be bigger and start up above the line. And incorrect writing sequences, there's this phrase of it's wrong on both sides, unfortunately. I don't tend to use the wrong language. I just, because I think we want to reinforce kids for trying. And then also, as you're going to see in writing rules, there's just so much ambiguity sometimes on what's wrong and what's right. So then I say, oh, this needs to be a capital letter. And then since it was missing the capital letter, the entire sequence wouldn't qualify for a point. So it would get the X on this and an X over here. This would be different than this one to where a word is missing. Since we can't really specifically, like we don't know what exact word it is, or sometimes there'll be disagreement between myself and other teachers to where they're like, well, they're actually missing 3 words. And it's like, can't give like 3 X's for like a missing something there. At least that's my feeling. And then I was like, oh, I'll just give it an X. But again, I had some teachers say that like, this is still really good. Like I'd be thrilled if my kid did Jake Water. Like that's such a huge win. I'll just give them a point off here for the lowercase. And I think that's completely fine. This isn't like the point difference that we would do here isn't a hill that anybody wants to die on. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just about like rewarding kids and showing them that like, oh, okay, yeah, here's a great example of what you did. However you go about doing that, I think is completely fine. I think it is important that if you do variations of your scoring, that's fine. Just make them transparent and try to stick with that scoring. So you don't want to have instances to where you change your scoring, the kids don't know about it, and then they're like, oh, wait a minute, I thought that this was okay. You do just want to communicate it with the kids.
Then there was another question. I don't know if you see it from Aaron. How did you score the run-on sentences, which featured great subject, verb, agreement, but were missing punctuation?
Yeah, that's tricky. We've gotten that's a great question, Aaron. Keep going back and forth on that, to be honest. So like I've worked with some folks who are just like, look, it's just a period problem. Like that's fine. Like we can work on that. And I agree. Like I mean, if I have a student who's writing this level of content and I can kind of tell what's going on, then to me, I was just like, okay, look, if this kid qualifies for an intervention, it's going to be something kind of low intensity, I think. So I think it's about the instructional decision that's being made. And I think that's one of the tricky things behind, if you take a look at writing universal screening, why we're so short on there's not a lot of guidance on how to meaningfully measure the progress of sentence writing, because again, you can have a long, complex sentence that's amazing, that has great quality content, but it is one long run-on sentence. And how do you like meaningfully distinguish that between a kid who didn't really write anything and it's incomplete? So I think that that's where that correct writing sequence metric, even though it's more time intensive, um, helps. But yeah, no, I completely agree. I think it's a matter, and there are other measures that um, that I know that that other researchers use, um, things like T units. There's also other metrics that can be used, particularly from speech language pathology, that I think are wonderful. I think at the end of the day, though, especially thinking about practice-based implications, I think it's just about kind of what's the couple or handful of things that teachers can get really good at practicing. And I think correct writing sequences seem to, even though they take more time, certainly than this, can provide enough pinpoints. But no, I definitely hear you, Aaron.
I have one more question if there's time. Could you go to the slide with the baseline and post instruction?
Yeah.
And like a true bad conference attendee, it's literally more of a comment than a
No,
question.
it's okay.
Sorry, y'all. This is the same student, right?
It is. Yeah.
Like this is the perfect demonstration of when a skill becomes fluent, how the student can dedicate more attention to transcription. Because look at just the change in handwriting quality. Like when we can make one skill fluent, look at how much better the overall appearance is. I just thought that was such a beyond just the sentence improving, such an excellent example. This was great.
Yeah. Oh, no, thanks. Yeah. And I think it's what I think that like the small ingredients of the overall intervention add up to something that's greater than the sum of its parts. Because I think that really for this particular kiddo, and I've seen it across the different participants, is that a light bulb goes off for kids that was like, oh, in order for me to get these points, because again, I'm not all about like points. I mean, I'm not just point motivated, but kids that are now having success, they're like, oh, so if I make this just a little neater, my teacher will be able to read it and then I'll get more points. Okay, that's pretty cool. So it's resulted in kind of these collateral side effects to where students are just getting more practice on writing something that's legible for people to read and understand.
How much time had passed for the student? Was this a beginning of a grade, an end of grade post, or?
So a month. So it
Okay.
was
Oh,
three.
wow.
Yeah, it was three lessons for
Uh-huh.
25 minutes, and then the 10 minutes for 15 sessions. So when you think about it, and again, the student wasn't starting completely at zero from baseline. So it was clear that they had some things under their belt. We just helped shape it into, I think, a more skillful application of their ideas, to where they're like, okay, these are steps that I need to internalize in order to do it. And we see that across students. Again, I think that these sentences are definitely better, but what needs to happen in addition to this intervention, or some things that I know Aaron will talk about next, is that we need to have students writing extended compositions, expressing their ideas, self-regulating their writing process. I think that that's where this allows that to really latch on, I think. So all the content knowledge pieces, et cetera, need to happen, I think, in order for these sentences to get even better. But I am happy that at least students are able to pick up these basic building blocks to keep growing their writing.
I like the picture prompts because I think it gets kids away from writing about themselves and realizing that when you write in school, you're writing for the reader. You're not really writing for yourself. That's journaling, or if you become a writer, which is so few people. But you could just see with this example how she or he has realized, I am giving this to someone else to consume. And this makes it easier for them to read it and understand it.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Well, team, I'm going to wrap us up because I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I am so grateful, Dr. Dashik, for all of your knowledge that you shared with us today, and super excited for Dr. Fitzpatrick to follow up on that greatness. So I'm going to put in the chat box The link to our North Carolina dyslexia or IDEA webpage. There are a plethora. Many of you mentioned great resources provided tonight. There are some great resources on our website, along with opportunities to become a member, opportunities to engage with future events that we have. Dr. Fitzpatrick will be joining us on Tuesday, September 23rd, to talk about self-regulated strategy development in writing, kind of an introduction into that SRSD work. Also, we have an opportunity in November, on November 13th, that you'll see on our webpage from 7 to 8:30 virtually again. And these are free events on developing young writers using a multi-sensory strategy approach. It's a collaboration with our friends at Alta. And then also in October, we are partnering with our Georgia friends through the International Dyslexia Association to support our Dyslexia Dash. It's a great fundraising event. So if you check out that on our webpage, just make sure that if that's something you're interested in supporting by joining in a walk up here or helping to fundraise, just make sure that you click on IDA North Carolina to help us raise funds for what we do. So please check out our website. We look forward to having you at future events, and reach out if there's anything that we can do to help. So team, thank you so much for joining us. We'll hang on if anyone has any burning questions. And have a great evening.
Huge thank you to everyone who organized this, and most particularly to Dr. Datchuk, who was able to join us from Iowa. Like Kristen said, our next session is on Tuesday, September 23rd from 6 o'clock to 7:30 Eastern Time.
Thanks, everybody.
Great way to earn literacy credits. Yay.